tells us that they come up here and stand for the role of women, that they come up here and fight for gender equality. But let's look at some of the things they've said throughout this debate. For example, their previous speaker, women are better fit to play the role of women. This completely contradicts what their second argument, which he presented, that of women aren't supposed to, women can break out of those roles. They don't have to be secretaries. They can be construction workers. But when the opposition comes up here and then tells us in the same speech that women are better fit to play the roles of women, well then what are we supposed to take out of this, ladies and gentlemen? And that was not the only time they in fact said this blatant sexism. We asked them about the 100 female winner. And we did this to prove exactly why, exactly the difference, in that people care about the men's 100-meter dash, but they don't care about the 100 women's dash. What was his response? The 100 dash female winner is completely irrelevant to this debate. But Usain Bolt is extremely important because people know him. No, it's exactly because they know one but not the other that they're irrelevant to the debate. Thank you. It's exactly because they're treated as different, that because we only focus on one of them and not both of them, that we have this kind of difference, and that we have the kind of sexist attitude that's blatant throughout their entire rhetoric of the opposition team. And I'm going to show this with two key questions. Firstly, that of where do we draw the line? And secondly, how do we get the rights train back up? So let's go into the first one, that of where do we draw the line? Now, the opposition told us that, well, women have different obstacles than men, such as they have to give birth, and there's no doubt about that. There are some key physiological differences for men and women, but that doesn't mean we should treat men and women differently, and especially when it comes to awards, because guess what? Everyone has barriers. Should we create different awards for people who come from poor backgrounds and people who come from rich backgrounds? Should we create different awards for people from Pakistan and people from the United States? Where are we going to draw the line of what kind of difficulties suddenly make someone eligible for an award? We're going to have so many different kinds of awards that ultimately we completely dilute the very point of these awards to show excellence, regardless of where they came from, regardless of who they are. They achieved something great. But every single time we say you achieved something great, and you're from Pakistan, and you're a woman, and you're a lesbian. Every single time we do that, we make it that much harder for those same people to end up achieving those words. Because the way when we allow this difference of treatment, that's when we get the 75% difference in work pay. Because ultimately, we say, well, we have a man. We ultimately make differences such as man worker of the month and female worker of the month. And then when the manager is getting their pay, he says, well, you know what? They're different. We have two different awards anyways, so I'm going to pay them differently because you know they're not doing the same things and they're not the same people. It's exactly when we make this kind of delineation that we're ultimately making it that much harder to make a difference. We're making it that much harder to actually change things. So where do we draw the line, ladies and gentlemen? Well, we've heard nothing about this from the opposition. In fact, when we brought up the transgender role, we only heard rebuttal about it in the last speech. No, thank you, ma'am. But the fact is, when they told us that they should be whatever they want, this in fact brings in a whole new paradigm of difficulties, such as in Australia, where they recently actually legislated a third gender called Z for people who don't identify themselves with either males or females. So when are we going to start legitimizing all those? When are we going to start legitimizing everything else? What about the lesbian and the gay communities who go through just as many difficulties for the discrimination that they face? Do we have to give them lesbian awards and then straight female awards? Ultimately, we cannot go this deep into these successes. A success is a success because of what they're doing, not because of who they are. And ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, to say it's a success because of who they are is not only demeaning, but it completely destroys the value of these. The Nobel Prize, we don't give it to them we don't give the Nobel Prize because of what countries they're from. We give them Nobel Prizes because of the idea. And ultimately, even then, a lot of these prizes are based on the ideas behind them. What gender does the European Union fit into, ladies and gentlemen? Are we going to put it into the female Nobel Prize or the male Nobel Peace Prize? Ultimately, these awards cannot be delineated in that way. And to do so, not only ultimately we see that it diminishes the awards in two different ways. First of all, let's assume that, let's take the example of the award of the advancement of the female advancement in the female advancement in the medical field. Now, if they're better than all the other men in the medical field, why do we have to add the female before it? No, thank you, madam. Why can't they just be the best person in the medical field and the person who advanced the most? No, thank you, madam. And if they're not, well, then they're not. Ultimately, that shouldn't matter. Ultimately, what should matter is their success. Ultimately, what should matter is what they've done in their field, not who they are. And what we've seen is we've seen no line of delineation. So ultimately, when it comes to actually making these changes, we've seen no progress from the opposition team. Their rhetoric completely contradicts their case by saying things like hormonal differences. And that's exactly the second question. That leads me perfectly to the second question. How do we get the rights train back up? Is it by talking about how women have hormonal differences and they react differently to situations because of their hormones? Really, ladies and gentlemen, this is the kind of rhetoric we're using about the differences between men and women. No, thank you, madam. If Hillary Clinton runs for president in 2016, are we going to say, well, ladies and gentlemen, she might be hormonal, so we should have a female president and a male president, depending on the situations? No, ladies and gentlemen, we only have one president. The same way we should only have one award. No, thank you, madam. And ultimately, our second argument was all about this. And they completely twisted it. Our second argument was called the rejuvenation of the feminist movement. Not that the feminist movement is done. In fact, it's the thought that feminist is done, which is exactly why we need to start moving this forward by doing actions like taking these ideas away. Because the existence of these awards have existed for so long that we have people like the opposition team who have decided to equate these with equality, when in fact it's the complete opposite. These awards are the things that denigrate equality. They're the ones that denigrate both men and women, regardless of who wins the award. So how do we get the rights train back up? It's by recognizing that men can be women and actors, and women can be men and actors. It's recognizing that men can be secretaries and women can be secretaries. It's recognizing that women can win the world 100-meter dash and that men can win the 100-meter dash, regardless of what the average man and the average woman is, physiologically speaking. It's the fact that any woman can achieve the same thing as any man can, not that they're based on these differences. That's how we get the right train back up, by acknowledging the fact that while there might be some differences, ultimately they're same people. And the awards, they don't do that. Because what we've seen in this debate is lines from the opposition, such as women are better fit to play the role of women. We completely disagree, ladies and gentlemen. If a woman wants to play the role of a man, she should. If a woman wants to win the advancement in the medical field for all men and women, then they should. But they shouldn't have to settle for just the women's field. A man shouldn't just have to settle for the men's medical field. And people who are from all those gray areas when it comes to gender shouldn't have to settle either. That's how we get the gender train moving, ladies and gentlemen. And that's how we close the gender gap that we've talked so much about.